Hello everyone. Today we will be starting with the new chapter, that is Civilizing the Native, Educating the Nation. This chapter will help you understand how the British tried to use education to reshape Indian society, the debates around these efforts, and the long-term impact on Indian culture and identity. British rule in India was not limited to politics or economics. It aimed to reshape Indian society. The British believed that through education they could civilize Indian, teaching them Western values, science, and rationality. This was part of what they called the white man's burden. By the early 19th century, the British realized that ruling India effectively required not only political dominance but also cultural influence. They aimed to reshape Indian society by changing how Indians thought, learned, and perceived their own civilization. Education thus became a major tool for civilizing Indians, not merely to enlighten them, but to create subjects who were obedient, loyal, and useful to colonial administration. It was designed to produce Indians who would think like the British and serve their interest. Two major schools of thought emerged within the British administration during this time. One was the Orientalist. They respected India's classical heritage and wanted education in traditional languages like Sanskrit and Persian. Another was Angelicist, who believed in promoting Western knowledge and the English language to modernize India. Now let's look at both one by one. First is Orientalist approach and early education policies. In the early phase of British rule, several administrators and the scholars known as Orientalists believed that India's ancient civilization was highly advanced and deserved respect. They thought the best way to govern India was to understand its culture, literature, and the laws through its own language and traditions. Prominent among them was Sir William Jones, a judge and linguist who founded the Asiatic Society of Bengal in 1784. He and others like Nathaniel Halhed and Henry Thomas Colebrook translated Sanskrit and Persian texts to understand India's history, law, science, and philosophy. Now, to promote such studies, the British established key institutions. First was Calcutta Madrasa, which was established in 1781. It was founded by Warren Hastings to promote Islamic and Persian learning for Muslim law officers. Other was Hindu Law College at Banaras, which was in 1791. It was established by Jonathan Duncan to train Hindu Pandits in Sanskrit text and law. Now, during this Orientalist phase, education was seen as a way to preserve India's tradition, not replace them. The British believed that ruling India effectively required knowledge of Indian culture and classical learning. This approach reflected a form of cultural respect, though still framed within a colonial mindset, as it helped the British understand Indian society to rule it better. Now, Orientalist education aimed to justify British rule by portraying the empire as the protector of India's ancient wisdom rather than its destroyer. Now, let's look at the Angelicist approach. Now, as the 19th century progressed, the British attitude towards Indian education changed dramatically. The earlier respect for India's classical learning gave way to a new school of thought, the Angelicist, led by thinkers like James Mill and Thomas Babington Macaulay. They criticized Orientalism as outdated and argued that traditional Indian learning based on the Sanskrit and Persian was full of errors and superstition. Macaulay, in his famous Minutes on Indian Education in 1835, declared that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. Macaulay argued that English education would civilize Indian and create a class of people who would be Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, opinions, and intellect. His aim was not to educate all Indians, but to form an elite group who would act as cultural intermediaries between the rulers and the masses. Now, following this logic, the English Education Act of 1835 was passed. It made English the official medium of instruction in higher education, cut funding for Oriental learning, promoted Western literature, philosophy, and science in the curriculum. This marked a complete shift from studying India's heritage to glorifying European knowledge. Education now became a tool to instill British values, strengthen colonial rule, and reshape Indian identity according to Western ideals. The English Education Act 1835 marked the triumph of Angelicist over Orientalist, turning education into a tool for cultural domination. Now, Macaulay's policy was part of the Britain's broader civilizing mission, introducing English not to uplift India but to create loyal subjects who thought like European. Now, after the English Education Act of 1835 made English the dominant language of higher learning, British education policy in India entered a new phase. In 1854, Sir Charles Wood, the president of the Board of the Control of the East India Company, issued what came to be known as the Wood's Dispatch. Now, Wood's Dispatch is often called as the Magna Carta of the English education in India. Now, Wood's Dispatch was a major step towards expanding and organizing education systematically across India. It recognized that the earlier policy of educating only a small elite was not enough. The dispatch recommended the promotion of education at all levels from primary to university, but always within a colonial framework. Now, the key objective of the Wood Dispatch were: first is mass education. It was to promote education among all classes of people, including the poor. Now, teachers training. It established teacher training institution to ensure quality education. Now, it set up universities at Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras to oversee examination, curricula, and degree. Now, for the first time, it officially encouraged education for women. Now, it recognized the use of vernacular languages at the primary level, but English remained dominant in higher studies. And each province was asked to create an education department for supervision. However, behind these progressive goals lay a clear colonial motive. The dispatch aimed to produce a class of educated Indians who could assist in administration, meaning they were cheap, efficient, and loyal to the British Empire. It was education with a purpose, meaning to serve, not to question. Thus, while it expanded educational access, it also deepened the cultural divide between the English educated elite and the rest of the India. Remember, while it encouraged mass and women's education, the real aim was to create a class of clerks and loyal subordinates. Now, while the British government focused on administrative and elitist education, another influential stream developed under the leadership of Christian missionaries. They saw education not just as learning to read and write, but as a way to civilize souls, meaning linking it with morality, social reform, and religion. Missionaries like William Carey, along with the Joshua Marshman and William Ward, set up the Serampur Mission School in 1800 in Bengal. It was one of the first to print textbook in Indian languages. Their efforts were partly independent of the East India Company, which initially resisted missionary activity, fearing unrest among Indians. However, as British influence grew, missionaries gained more freedom. They began establishing schools for children from marginalized communities, including Dalits, tribal groups, and girls, who were usually excluded from the mainstream education. Their curriculum combined reading, writing, English, and Bible studies, but also emphasized discipline, cleanliness, honesty, and obedience, and moral qualities they believed would make Indians civilized and Christian like. While some criticized their covert religious agenda, their work also bring positive social changes, such as encouraging female literacy, educating lower caste, and challenging discriminatory customs. In this way, missionary education indirectly contributed to the early social reform movements in the 19th century. Now, missionary education acted as a double-edged sword. It aimed to Christianize and civilize, but also helped democratize education among marginalized sections. Now, let's see what was the impact on the traditional school, meaning Pathshalas. Before British rule, most Indian children, especially in villages, attended local school called Pathshalas. These schools were run by community teachers who taught in the native languages of the student. The biggest strength of the Pathshala was their flexibility, meaning fees were not fixed. Teachers could adjust depending on a family's income or even accept food or essentials instead of money. Timetables were adaptable, classes often adjusted to the farming cycle or family needs, so children could learn even during busy agricultural season. There were no formal exams or rigid rules. Learning was based on simple repetition, oral recitation, and practical knowledge. The curriculum varied according to local needs, tradition, and community expectation. When the British tried to reform Indian education, they wanted to make schools more systematic and controlled. Pathshalas had to follow new rules, meaning fees now became fixed, which made it harder for poor families to afford. All students and teachers had to follow a rigid and daily timetable. Annual exams and written records were introduced, favoring only those who could attend regularly and cope with the pressure. The curriculum was standardized, often ignoring local relevance and diversity. This shift caused many poor, rural, and peasant children to be excluded. The personal approach and the local flavor of the Pathshala declined. The traditional Indian knowledge systems suffered. Now, as British education policies reshaped learning across India, many Indian thinkers deeply questioned the purpose and value of the new system. Two of the most influential voices in this debate were Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore. Now, Gandhi did not support the British colonial model, which taught Indians mainly in English and often separated learning from real life. He believed true education should build self-respect. It should help a student develop practical skill like craft and farming and be taught in Indian languages. Gandhiji wanted education to be meaningful for ordinary families, not just for those aiming for government jobs. He states that learning should nurture dignity, independence, and pride in local knowledge. Now, Tagore was also critical of the rigid book focused system of British school. He felt that children should learn through creativity and interact with nature, not just memorization. Tagore established Santi Niketan in 1901, where students could study under trees, paint, sing, and mix Indian tradition with modern science and art. His approach encouraged a blend of Indian heritage and global ideas in a joyful, open environment. Both Gandhiji and Tagore's ideas challenged British policies and inspired generations to rethink what true education could mean for India's future. Now, even after independence, debates about Indian education have continued. One core issue is language. Should students learn in their mother language, in Hindi, or in English? Each choices affect how well students can learn and which part of Indian society feel included or left out. Curriculum design raises further question: how much history, literature, and moral education should come from Indian sources versus global sources. Policymakers, teachers, and parents still argue about these choices as they shape how young Indians learn about themselves and the world. Modern data such as recent UNESCO and UDISC reports show that challenges remain. Dropout rates are still high in some states, often due to poverty, family responsibility, or lack of accessible school. There are ongoing debates about which language and policies best promote inclusion and equality for all communities. Efforts are underway to improve school infrastructure, teaching quality, and digital access. But many students, especially in rural or disadvantaged areas, still face barriers. These connections show the question raised in colonial times are still relevant. India's project of educating is unfinished, requiring new answers to the old challenges. Now, this table highlights the key milestone in the history of education in India during British rule. Understanding these events help us see how education policies evolved and their impact on Indian society. Now, in 1871, Calcutta Madrasa. Now, in 1781, Calcutta Madrasa founded. This institution was established to teach Islamic theology and Persian, reflecting the British attempt to accommodate Muslim education early in their rule. Now, in 1791, Hindu College at Banaras was founded. It was to promote learning in Sanskrit and other traditional subjects, emphasizing classical Indian knowledge as part of British Orientalist policies. Now, I forgot to write here, in 1800, Serampur Mission School was established. Now, in 1813, Charter Act came and it recognized official role in education. Now, in 1835, this period marked a major shift toward English as a medium of instruction. Macaulay's Minute argued for teaching English and Western knowledge, now sidelining traditional Indian education. In 1854, Wood's Dispatch came, and in 1901, Rabindranath Tagore founded Shanti Niketan as a response to colonial education. Let's start with the exercise. Match the following. Now, William Jones was he had respect for ancient cultures. Rabindranath Tagore promoted learning in a natural environment. Now, Thomas Macaulay wanted to promote English education. Mahatma Gandhi was critical of English education. In Pathshala we have gurus. Next is state whether true or false. First is James Mill was a severe critic of the Orientalist. It is a true statement. James Mill criticized the Orientalist, arguing that European education and knowledge were superior to Indian tradition. Now the next is the 1854 Dispatch on Education was in favor of English being introduced as a medium of higher education in India. It is a true. The 1854 Wood's Dispatch supported English as the medium of higher education in India. Next is Mahatma Gandhi thought that the promotion of literacy was the most important aim of education. It is false, as Mahatma Gandhi believed literacy alone was not true education. Education should develop a person's mind and character through craft and moral training. Next is Rabindranath Tagore felt the children ought to be subjected to strict discipline. Now this is a false statement, as Rabindranath Tagore opposed strict discipline. He favored a free and natural learning environment for children. Next is, why did William Jones feel the need to study Indian history, philosophy and law? William Jones believed that in order to govern India effectively, the British needed to understand its history, philosophy and legal tradition. He argued that true administration required knowledge of India's culture and heritage, not just the use of power. Jones admired the depth of Indian civilization and saw great values in studying its ancient texts and languages, both for scholarly purposes and for improving governance. Now the next is, why did James Mill and Thomas Macaulay think the European education was essential in India? Now James Mill and Thomas Macaulay argued that European education was crucial for India's progress, as they believed it would modernize and civilize Indian society by replacing what they saw as outdated traditional learning with Western science, reason and values. Mill criticized the Orientalists for emphasizing ancient Indian texts, which he considered irrelevant for modern governance and development. Macaulay, in his Minute on Indian Education, asserted that a small group of Indians educated in English would form a class, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinion, in morals and in intellect. This class, he believed, would serve as intermediaries between the British rule and the Indian population. Both thinkers viewed English education as a means to create loyal, skilled administrators and to integrate India more deeply into British imperial system, fostering what they considered a more civilized and progressive society based on Western ideals. Next is, why did Mahatma Gandhi want to teach children handicraft? Now, Mahatma Gandhi wanted children to learn handicraft because he believed Education should be practical, meaningful, and based on self-reliance. He saw handicraft training as a way to preserve India's traditional skill and culture, while also promoting economic independence by reducing dependence on British manufactured goods. This idea was central to his philosophy of Nai Talim, or basic education, which emphasized learning through productive work. Gandhi believed that education should nurture moral values, dignity of labor, and self sufficiency, rather than merely focus on literacy or bookish knowledge. Next is, why did Mahatma Gandhi think that English education had enslaved Indians? Now, Mahatma Gandhi believed that English education had enslaved Indians because it alienated them from their own culture, language, and traditional skills. Rather than empowering people, this system promoted Western values and ideals while undermining indigenous knowledge and the dignity of manual work. According to Gandhiji, such education produced a class of Indians who thought and behaved like a British, losing pride in their own heritage. This dependence on foreign ideas and goods, he argued, led to a deeper kind of mental and cultural slavery. Even if political domination was the most visible form of British rule, Gandhi felt that intellectual and moral dependence created by English education was an equally powerful and damaging form of colonization. Now, in the next video, we will start with the new chapter, that is chapter 8, Women, Caste and Reform. Thank you.